The great hall of the Throne of Ashes had not seen such silence in 1,000 years. Elder Mova stood at the center, her silver armor catching the dim light of the dying sun through the massive windows. Around her, the High Council waited. 12 warrior women, each older than most planets in the known galaxy, watched her with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "The blood tests are complete," Elder Mova said. Her voice did not shake, though her heart did. "Our genetic decay has reached the final stage. Within 3 generations, no Valanthi child will survive birth." The words hung in the air like poison. The Valanthi had conquered half the galaxy. They had crushed armies, burned worlds, and built an empire on the bones of their enemies. But they could not fight this enemy. They could not kill time itself. The Valanthi were a species of warrior women. For 10,000 years, they had taken males from other species to continue their bloodlines. It was not cruelty. It was survival. Their genetics required outside input to remain strong, but centuries of war had destroyed most compatible species. The few that remained produced weak children, sickly offspring that died before their first battle. "There is one option," Elder Mova continued. "The new species. The humans." Whispers spread through the council. Humans were strange creatures. Small, weak, emotional. They had only recently achieved space travel, and their tiny territory sat at the edge of Valanthi space. A peace treaty, signed just 5 years ago, kept them safe from conquest. They were considered beneath notice. "Humans?" One council member laughed. "They break their own bones when they fall. They die from simple infections. They cry when they feel sad. What strength could they possibly offer our bloodlines?" Elder Mova raised her hand for silence. "The scientists believe human genetics are highly adaptable. Their weakness may be their strength. They survive everything. Disease, disaster, war. They breed quickly and change quickly. This adaptability may be exactly what our blood needs." She paused and looked toward the 3 figures standing apart from the council. 3 young warriors. 3 sisters. The daughters of the legendary warlord Kessa, who had died in battle 10 years ago. Raya, Neela, Sarah. Elder Mova spoke their names like a command. "You are the last of Kessa's bloodline. The council has decided. You will each select a human mate. If the breeding is successful, our people may survive. If it fails, your mother's legacy ends with you." Raya, the eldest, stood perfectly still. She was tall even for a Valanthi, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of her family's honor. Her face showed nothing. She had learned long ago to bury her feelings beneath duty. "I accept," she said simply. Neela, the middle sister, was not so calm. Her hands became fists at her sides. Fire burned in her golden eyes. She was the finest warrior of her generation, undefeated in single combat. The thought of mating with a weak human made her stomach turn. "This is an insult," she growled. "Our mother killed 10,000 enemies with her bare hands. And now her daughters must breed with creatures who cannot even survive their own son?" "Ah, you will do your duty," Elder Mova said coldly, "or you will be removed from the succession." Nyla wanted to argue. She wanted to fight, but she saw the look in her grandmother's eyes and understood. This was not a request. This was an order from the highest authority in the Empire. "Fine," Neela spat. "But I will choose the strongest human I can find. And if he is weak, I will break him myself." The youngest sister, Sarah, had remained quiet throughout the meeting. She was smaller than her sisters, built for speed rather than strength. While Raya commanded armies and Neela won battles, Sarah flew scout ships into unknown space. She had seen more alien species than anyone in her family. "I have studied humans," Sarah said softly. "They are interesting. They feel everything so deeply. Pain, joy, love, fear. They experience more emotion in one day than we feel in a year. Perhaps that is not weakness. Perhaps that is something we have lost." Neela looked at her youngest sister with disgust. "You sound like you want to mate with one of them." Sira smiled slightly. I want to understand them. That is different. The council meeting ended, and the three sisters walked together through the ancient halls of the Throne of Ashes. Statues of their ancestors lined the walls. Warriors who had conquered worlds, generals who had crushed rebellions, warlords who had shaped the galaxy itself, and now their descendants would mate with humans to survive. Far across the galaxy, on orbital station Kira 7, a man named Kang Tae-ho was fixing a broken pipe. The station was old and tired, like most human outposts this far from Earth. Tae-ho worked in the engineering section, repairing whatever broke and keeping the station alive. It was quiet work, simple work, exactly what he needed. He had been a military medic once. He had served in the border conflicts, pulling wounded soldiers from burning ships and broken stations. He had seen too much death, too much pain. When his service ended, he wanted nothing more than silence and solitude. The pipe hissed and sprayed coolant across his face. Tae-ho wiped his eyes and continued working. Around him, the station hummed with the sound of 1,000 machines keeping 3,000 humans alive in the cold void of space. Then the alarm started. Red lights flashed. A computerized voice announced a reactor leak in Section 7. Tae-ho grabbed his toolkit and ran. He found the leak in minutes. A cracked containment seal was spilling radiation into a corridor where 3 workers lay unconscious. The radiation was not deadly yet, but it would be soon. Standard procedure said to seal the section and wait for a hazmat team. Tae-ho did not wait. He wrapped his jacket around his face, walked into the radiation, and dragged the first worker to safety. Then the second. Then the third. By the time the hazmat team arrived, all 3 workers were in the medical bay. And Tae-ho was patching the seal with emergency foam. The station commander called him a hero. Tae-ho just shrugged. He had done what needed to be done. That was all. What he did not know was that someone was watching. Thousands of light years away, in a small room aboard a Valanthe scout ship, Sarah replayed the footage. She had placed monitoring devices on a dozen human stations, searching for candidates worthy of her family's bloodline. She watched Tae-ho walk into the radiation without hesitation. She watched him carry bodies twice his weight to safety. She watched him refuse praise and return to work as if nothing had happened. Interesting, she whispered. She saved the footage and sent a message to her sisters. She had found a candidate worth investigating. A human who ran toward danger instead of away from it. A human who seemed completely unaware of his own courage. The selection had begun. The Valanthe ship arrived at orbital station Kira 7, like a knife cutting through darkness. It was called the Crimson Vow, and it was larger than the entire station. Human workers stopped their tasks to stare through the windows as the massive vessel settled into orbit. They had never seen anything so beautiful or so terrifying. Kang Tae-ho watched from the engineering deck. He had read about the Valanthe in news reports. A species of warrior women who had conquered half the galaxy. The peace treaty with humanity was only 5 years old, and most humans still feared what might happen if that peace ended. They say they're here for trade negotiations, said his co-worker, a young woman named Park Yuna. She worked in the diplomatic section but often visited engineering to escape the stress of her job. But nobody sends a warship for trade talks. Tae-ho shrugged. Not our problem. We fix pipes. They negotiate treaties. Yuna laughed. Actually, it might be your problem. The station commander wants you to join the diplomatic team as a technical advisor. The Valanthe requested someone who understands human engineering. Tae-ho frowned. He did not like politics. He did not like attention. But he also did not like saying no to direct orders. Fine, he said. But I'm not wearing a formal uniform. The meeting took place in the station's largest conference room. Tae-ho stood in the corner, trying to be invisible. He wore his usual work clothes, gray pants, a simple jacket, and boots stained with engine grease. The diplomats around him wore their finest suits and practiced their most professional smiles. Then the Valanthe entered, and every human in the room forgot how to breathe. Raya came first. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her body covered in ceremonial armor that gleamed like liquid silver. Her face was sharp and beautiful, with eyes the color of cold steel. She moved like a predator, each step precise and controlled. Nyla followed. She was shorter than Raya but wider, her muscles visible even beneath her armor. Her golden eyes scanned the room like a hunter searching for prey. When her gaze passed over Tejo, he felt a chill run down his spine. Sira came last. She was the smallest of the three, with a grace that reminded Tejo of dancers he had seen on Earth. Her eyes were curious rather than cold, and she smiled slightly when she saw the nervous humans waiting for her. The negotiations began. Tejo understood almost nothing. They talked about trade routes and resource exchanges and diplomatic protocols. He stood in his corner and waited for someone to ask him a technical question. No one did. Instead, Raya suddenly turned to face him. Tejo walked to the center of the room. Every eye watched him. He kept his face calm, though his heart beat faster. "I am told you saved 3 lives last week," Raya said. "You walked into radiation that should have killed you. Why?" Tejo thought about the question. They needed help. "Were you not afraid?" "Yes. But fear is just a feeling. It doesn't control what I do." Raya studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "Interesting. Among my people, such words would be considered either very brave or very stupid." "Maybe both," Tejo said. Nyla laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together. "I like this one. He has fire in his belly, even if his body is weak." She stepped closer to Tejo, towering over him. "Tell me, little human, can you fight?" "I was a soldier once. I know how to defend myself." "Then prove it." Nyla's smile widened. "Spar with me. Show me what human warriors can do." The diplomats began to protest. This was not part of the negotiations. It could cause an incident. But Raya raised her hand, and they fell silent. "My sister has issued a challenge," Raya said. "Will you accept or refuse?" Tejo looked at Nyla. She was twice his size and probably 10 times his strength. He had no chance of winning. But something in her eyes told him that refusing would be worse than losing. "I accept," he said. They cleared a space in the center of the room. Nyla removed her armor, revealing a simple combat suit beneath. Her muscles moved like cables under her skin. Tejo took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "Rules?" he asked. "Simple," Nyla said. "Make me yield, or I make you yield. No weapons, no killing. Everything else is allowed." She attacked before she finished speaking. Tejo barely dodged the first punch. It passed so close to his face that he felt the wind of it. He rolled to the side, putting distance between them. Nyla followed, faster than anything her size should move. He could not block her strikes. Each one would shatter his bones. So he didn't try. He ducked. He dodged. He redirected her momentum when he could. He used every trick he had learned in military training, every technique designed to help a smaller fighter survive against a larger opponent. Nyla grew frustrated. Her attacks became faster, more aggressive. She was not used to opponents who refused to stand and fight. She was used to warriors who met her strength with strength. Tejo did not have strength. He had patience. Minutes passed. Nyla's breathing grew heavy. Tejo's body screamed with exhaustion. But he kept moving. He let her chase him. He let her waste her energy on attacks that never landed. Finally, Nyla caught him. Her hand closed around his throat, and she lifted him off the ground. Tejo grabbed her wrist, but he could not break her grip. She squeezed, slowly cutting off his air. "Yield," she commanded. Tejo's vision began to darken. His lungs burned. Every instinct told him to surrender. But somewhere deep inside, a stubborn voice refused. "No," he whispered. Nyla squeezed harder. Tejo's face turned red, then purple. Still, he did not yield. He hung from her grip like a dying animal. But his eyes never left hers. Something changed in Nyla's expression. The anger faded. Something else replaced it. Something like respect. She released him. Tejo fell to the floor, gasping for air. His throat felt like fire, His body shook with exhaustion. But he was alive. And he had not surrendered. Neela stood over him, her chest heaving. She had expected an easy victory. Instead, she had fought for longer than any opponent in recent memory. "You did not win," she said. "I know," Teho replied, still struggling to breathe. "But you did not lose either." She offered him her hand. "You have earned my attention, little human. That is rare." And Teho took her hand and let her pull him to his feet. Around them, the diplomats stared in shocked silence. They had never seen anything like this. Later that night, the three sisters met in their private quarters aboard the Crimson Vow. They sat in a circle, drinking fermented nectar from their homeworld. "He is stubborn," Raya said. "Foolishly stubborn. He should have yielded." "But he didn't," Sarah said. "That is what matters. I have watched hundreds of human candidates. None of them have shown such will." Nyla said nothing. She stared at her drink, remembering the look in Teho's eyes as she choked him. No fear. No begging. Just quiet refusal. "He is interesting," she finally admitted. "I will give him that," Sarah smiled. "Then we agree. We will continue observing him. We will test him further. And if he passes those tests..." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The selection had entered its second phase. The proving grounds aboard the Crimson Vow were ancient. They had been built into the ship's core centuries ago, designed to test the worthiness of those who wished to join Volanthi bloodlines. Every surface was made of black stone that absorbed light. The air smelled of old sweat and older blood. Kang Teho stood at the entrance, wearing only a thin training suit. Beside him, Sira explained what would happen. "The trials of flame are sacred to our people," she said. "There are 3 tests: body, mind, spirit. You must complete all 3 to prove yourself worthy. And if I fail, then you are not worthy, and we will return you to your station with our gratitude for your participation." Teho nodded. He had agreed to these trials because the alternative was returning to his ordinary life. And somehow, after everything that had happened, ordinary life felt impossible. He needed to know if he was worthy, not for the Volanthi, for himself. "I'm ready," he said. The first trial was the Chamber of Heat. Teho entered a room where the temperature rose higher with each passing minute. The walls glowed red. The air burned his lungs. Volanthi warriors could survive temperatures that would cook a human alive. Teho was not a Volanthi warrior. He sat in the center of the room and closed his eyes. He remembered his training as a medic. He remembered the breathing techniques used to control pain during emergency surgery. Slow breaths. Deep breaths. Focus on the air entering your body, not the fire surrounding it. Minutes passed. The temperature climbed. Sweat poured from Teho's skin, evaporating almost instantly. His body screamed at him to run. His mind told him to stay. He thought about the soldiers he had saved during his service. Men and women who had endured injuries far worse than heat. Burns that covered their entire bodies. Wounds that exposed bone and organ. They had survived because they refused to give up. Teho refused to give up. When the trial finally ended, he could barely stand. His skin was bright red, and his lips were cracked and bleeding. But he was alive. He had passed. Sira was waiting outside. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "You should not have survived that," she said. "The chamber reached temperatures that would kill most species. I survived worse during the war," Teho replied. His voice was rough, damaged by the heat. "Pain is temporary. Death is permanent. I choose temporary." The second trial was the Labyrinth of Shadows. Teho entered a maze of twisting corridors and absolute darkness. The trial was designed to test predatory instincts. Volanthi warriors were hunters. They stalked their prey through darkness, using sound and smell to track their targets. Teho was not a predator. He was a medic. He saved lives. He did not take them, so he thought like prey instead. Prey animals did not hunt. They hid, they waited, they moved only when necessary and never in predictable patterns. Teho moved through the labyrinth like a ghost. He pressed himself against walls. He changed direction randomly. He listened for the sounds of the creatures hunting him and moved away from them. Hours passed. The darkness was absolute. Teho lost all sense of time and direction, but he kept moving. He kept thinking. He kept surviving. When he finally found the exit, 3 Valanthi hunters were waiting for him. They had been tracking him through the maze, and they had failed to catch him. Their expressions showed confusion and something else: admiration. No one escapes the labyrinth without killing at least one hunter. One of them said, "You killed none, yet you survived. How?" Teho smiled weakly. "I didn't try to beat you. I just tried to outlast you." The third trial was the worst. The Chamber of Spirits was a small room with nothing in it except a single chair. Teho sat down, and the room began to change. The walls disappeared. The floor fell away. He found himself standing in a place he recognized: the burning remains of a medical station. Fire everywhere, smoke filling his lungs, and in front of him, a young soldier with a wound in his chest, Private Kim Jae-sung. 20 years old. Engaged to be married. He had been hit by shrapnel during an attack, and Teho had tried to save him. For 3 hours, Teho had fought to keep Jae-sung alive. For 3 hours, he had poured every skill he possessed into saving one life. Jae-sung had died anyway. The simulation was perfect. Teho could feel the heat of the fire. He could smell the blood. He could hear Jae-sung's voice, weak and fading, asking if he was going to be okay. "Am I going to make it, Doc?" Teho's hands began to shake. This was his greatest failure. His greatest fear. The moment that haunted his dreams every night. "You're going to be fine," Teho whispered, just as he had whispered years ago. "Just stay with me." But Jae-sung's eyes began to close. His breathing slowed. His hand, which had been gripping Teho's arm, fell limp. "No," Teho said. "No, no. Stay with me, please." Jae-sung died. Teho felt something break inside him. Tears streamed down his face. His body shook with sobs he had been holding back for years. He had never cried for Jae-sung. He had never allowed himself to grieve. He had buried the pain so deep that he thought it would never surface. Now it exploded out of him. He screamed. He punched the ground until his knuckles bled. He let every emotion he had suppressed for years come flooding out. And then, slowly, he stood up. Jae-sung's body lay before him. The simulation demanded something. Teho understood what it was. He bent down and lifted Jae-sung's body onto his shoulders. It was heavy. So heavy. But he had carried wounded soldiers before. He had carried them through fire and smoke and enemy gunfire. He could carry one more. Step by step, Teho walked through the burning station. The fire reached for him. The smoke choked him. His muscles screamed for rest. But he kept walking. He carried Jae-sung to the extraction point. He laid the body down gently, arranging the hands across the chest. Then he knelt beside his fallen patient and said the words he had never been able to say. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I promise I'll keep trying to save others. Your death wasn't meaningless. It taught me that some fights can't be won, but we fight them anyway, because that's what humans do." The simulation ended. Teho found himself back in the small room, sitting in the chair. His face was wet with tears. His body felt empty, drained of everything. The door opened, and the 3 sisters entered. They had watched the entire trial. They had seen everything. Nyla's face was unreadable. Raya's eyes held something that might have been surprise. Sarah wiped moisture from her own eyes, an emotion Valanthi rarely showed. "You completed the trials," Raya said quietly. "All 3. I did what I had to do." "No." Raya stepped closer. "You did more than that. You faced your deepest wound and carried it to the end. Among my people, that is the definition of true strength." Neela nodded slowly. "I called you weak when we first met. I was wrong. Your body may be fragile, but your spirit is stronger than any warrior I have known." Sarah knelt beside Teho and took his hand. You feel things so deeply. Pain, grief, love. We, Valanthi, have forgotten how to feel. We buried our emotions so long ago that we can barely remember them. But watching you, I think perhaps we need to learn again. Teho looked at the three sisters. For the first time since the trials began, he allowed himself to hope. What happens now? He asked. Raya answered. Now we take you to our homeworld. The High Council must approve you. And then, she paused, then we will see what the future holds. The future. Teho had stopped thinking about the future years ago. But now, looking at these three warrior women who had witnessed his darkest moment and not turned away, he began to believe that perhaps the future was worth thinking about again. The throne of ashes was everything Teho had imagined, and nothing like he expected. The Valanthi homeworld was a planet of red deserts and black mountains, where twin suns painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The capital city rose from the desert, like a monument to war itself. Towers of dark stone reached toward the sky. Statues of ancient warriors lined every street, and at the center of it all stood the palace, where the High Council waited. Teho walked through the great doors with the three sisters at his sides. He wore simple clothes, refusing the armor they had offered him. He was not a Valanthi warrior. He would not pretend to be one. The council chamber was vast. 12 ancient warriors sat in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on the small human who dared to stand before them. At the center sat Elder Mova, grandmother to Raya, Neela, and Sira. Her silver hair fell to her shoulders, and her face was lined with centuries of battle and loss. Kang Teho, she said. His name sounded strange in her mouth, like a word from a language she had never learned. You have completed the trials of flame. You have impressed my granddaughters. But trials and impressions are not enough. The council must know. Why should we allow human blood to mix with ours? Teho thought carefully before answering. He knew that everything depended on his words. I am not strong, he said. Not like your warriors. I cannot lift mountains or crush enemies with my bare hands. Any Valanthi child could defeat me in combat. The council members whispered among themselves. This was not the answer they expected. But strength is not everything, Teho continued. Humans survive because we adapt, we change, we feel pain deeply, and that pain teaches us to avoid future mistakes. We love deeply, and that love gives us something to fight for. We fear death, and that fear makes every moment precious. He took a breath. Your species is dying because your blood has grown too pure, too strong, too unchanging. Maybe what you need is not more strength. Maybe what you need is someone who knows how to bend without breaking. Elder Mova studied him for a long moment. Pretty words. But words are wind. What can you actually offer to the daughters of Kessa? Protection. Not with weapons, but with care. I was a medic. I saved lives. I will protect your granddaughters not by killing their enemies, but by keeping them alive when their enemies have been defeated. I will heal their wounds. I will share their burdens. I will stand beside them, not as a warrior, but as a partner. The chamber fell silent. The council members exchanged glances. Some looked disgusted, others looked thoughtful. A few, Teho noticed, looked almost hopeful. Elder Mova rose from her seat and walked toward him. She was smaller than her granddaughters, but somehow more terrifying. Her eyes held 10,000 years of wisdom and pain. My granddaughters are the last of their mother's bloodline, she said quietly, so only Teho could hear. Warlord Kessa was my daughter. I watched her die in battle. And I have watched her daughters carry the weight of her legacy ever since. They need more than a mate, human. They need an anchor, something to hold them steady when the storms come. She searched his face. Can you be that anchor? Teho met her gaze without flinching. I can try. That's all anyone can do. Elder Mova nodded slowly. Then she returned to her seat and addressed the council. The human has passed my examination. He speaks with honesty, not arrogance. He offers partnership, not conquest. I recommend that we approve his candidacy. The vote was not unanimous, but it was enough. Taeho was officially recognized as a candidate for the Daughters of Kessa. The days that followed were strange and wonderful. Taeho was given quarters in the palace, rooms larger than his entire apartment on orbital station Kira 7. He ate meals with the sisters, learning about their culture and sharing stories of his own. Tensions began to surface. Nyla had grown close to Taeho during their training sessions. She taught him basic combat techniques, and he taught her breathing exercises for controlling pain. They spent hours together, sweating and laughing and learning. Sarah resented this. She had found Taeho first. She had recognized his potential when no one else did. Yet now she felt like an outsider in her own selection. Raya remained distant, watching her sisters argue over a human like two children fighting over a toy. She found it beneath her dignity. And yet, she could not stop thinking about him. One night, Taeho could not sleep. He wandered through the palace corridors, marveling at the statues and tapestries that decorated every wall. Eventually, he found himself in a memorial garden. Stone monuments rose from the sand, each one carved with names and dates, a place for honoring the dead. Raya was there, standing alone before a massive statue. The figure depicted a warrior woman in battle armor, her face fierce and beautiful. Taeho recognized her from paintings he had seen. Warlord Kessa, the mother of the three sisters. "You should be asleep," Raya said without turning around. "So should you." Raya said nothing. Taeho walked closer and stood beside her, looking up at the statue. "She was magnificent," Raya said finally. "The greatest warrior our people have produced in 10 generations. She could have conquered the entire galaxy if she had lived long enough. How did she die?" "A battle against the Sketh Dominion. She led a charge against their flagship. She killed their admiral with her own hands, but the ship exploded before she could escape." Raya's voice cracked slightly. "She saved 10,000 soldiers that day, and I never got to say goodbye." Taeho understood that pain. He knew what it felt like to lose someone without warning, to be left with nothing but memories and questions. "I lost a patient once," he said. "A young soldier. I tried everything to save him, but it wasn't enough. For years, I blamed myself. I thought that if I had been faster, smarter, stronger, he would have lived. And now? Now I understand that some battles cannot be won. We fight them anyway, because fighting is all we can do. But the outcome was never in our control." Raya turned to face him. Her steel eyes glistened with moisture she would never admit to. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I have never admitted that to anyone. But I am afraid that I will be the last of my mother's bloodline. That everything she built, everything she sacrificed, will end with me." Taeho reached out and took her hand. She flinched at the contact but did not pull away. "You are not alone," he said. "Your sisters stand with you. And now, if you'll let me, I stand with you too. The bloodline doesn't end with you, Raya. It continues. It grows. It changes. That's what life does." Raya stared at their joined hands. She had held weapons her entire life. She had crushed enemies. She had torn ships apart with her bare hands. But she had never held a hand simply for comfort. It felt strange. It felt warm. It felt right. "You are strange, human," she said. "So I've been told." For the first time since Taeho had met her, Raya smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it transformed her face. The cold general became something softer, something human. They stood together in the memorial garden until dawn, two strangers from different worlds, finding common ground in shared grief. When morning came, everything had changed. Raya no longer looked at Taeho as a candidate. She looked at him as an equal, and the walls she had built around her heart began, slowly, to crumble. The attack came without warning. Taeho was eating breakfast with Sira when the alarms began. Red lights flashed throughout the palace. Soldiers ran through corridors shouting orders. The peaceful morning transformed into chaos within seconds. "What's happening?" Taeho asked. Sira's face had gone pale. "The Sketh. They've attacked our border colonies. The Sketh Dominion. Teho had heard stories about them. An ancient enemy of the Volanthi. A species of insectoid warriors who had fought the Empire for thousands of years. The peace between them was fragile, maintained only by mutual destruction. If the Sketh were attacking, it meant that peace was over. Raya appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her battle armor. Emergency council meeting. Sira, you're needed in the war room. Teho. She hesitated. Stay here. Stay safe. Teho watched her go. He understood why she wanted him to stay. He was not a warrior. He could not fight the Sketh. He would only be a burden on the battlefield, but he was also a medic. And in war, medics were needed. He found Nyla in the armory, strapping weapons to her body with practiced efficiency. Her golden eyes burned with anticipation. She had been waiting for this. A real battle. A real enemy. A chance to prove herself. Take me with you, Teho said. Nyla laughed. You would die in the first minute. I'm not asking to fight. I'm asking to heal. Your warriors will be wounded. Your medical teams will be overwhelmed. I have training. I have experience. Let me help. Nyla studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'll speak to Raya. No promises. The argument was fierce. Raya refused at first, insisting that bringing a human into a war zone was foolish. Sarah agreed, but for different reasons. She was afraid of losing him. Teho stood his ground. I completed your trials, he said. I proved myself worthy. And part of being worthy is standing beside you when times are hard. I'm not asking to fight your battles. I'm asking to support you while you fight them. In the end, Raya agreed. But she assigned him to the medical bay of the warship Ashen Blade, far from the front lines. You will stay in the back, she commanded. You will treat wounded soldiers. You will not engage in combat under any circumstances. Is that understood? Understood. The Ashen Blade launched 3 days later. Teho watched through a viewport as the Volanthi homeworld shrank into the distance. He did not know if he would ever see it again. The journey to the border took 2 weeks. Teho spent most of that time in the medical bay, learning Volanthi anatomy and preparing supplies. The Volanthi doctors were skeptical of him at first, but his knowledge impressed them. Human medicine was different from theirs, more focused on adaptation and improvisation. They had never considered some of his techniques. When they finally reached the battle zone, everything changed. The Sketh had destroyed 3 colonies already. Their ships filled the space around the border, black shapes covered in organic armor that seemed to pulse with dark energy. The Volanthi fleet engaged them immediately. The Ashen Blade shook as weapons fired and shields absorbed enemy attacks. Teho stayed in the medical bay. Wounded soldiers began arriving within minutes. Burns. Broken bones. Radiation poisoning. He moved from patient to patient, treating what he could and directing others to handle what he couldn't. Hours passed. The flow of wounded never stopped. Teho's hands grew tired. His mind grew foggy. But he kept working. Then the ship shook violently. Lights flickered and died. Emergency power activated, casting everything in dim red light. A computerized voice announced what Teho already feared. Hull breach in medical section. Evacuate immediately. Teho looked around. Half the patients couldn't move. If they stayed, they would die. If the staff tried to move them all, they wouldn't make it before the section sealed. Everyone out, he ordered the medical team. I'll stabilize the patients who can be moved. But sir, go, now. The team ran. Teho moved faster than he had ever moved in his life. He disconnected monitors. He loaded patients onto mobile stretchers. He pushed them toward the door one by one, racing against the countdown. He managed to save 7 patients before the section sealed, but he wasn't done. The cargo bay was the closest safe area. Teho ran there and began setting up an emergency medical station. He used cargo containers as beds. He converted equipment into makeshift surgical tools. He turned a storage area into a hospital in less than an hour. The wounded kept coming. Taeho kept working. And then Neela arrived. They carried her in on a stretcher. Plasma burns covered her left side. Her armor had been melted into her skin. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. One of the soldiers carrying her was crying. "She saved us," the soldier said. "The Sketh were breaking through our lines. She charged their position alone. She killed dozens of them before they brought her down." Taeho felt his heart stop. Then his training took over. "Put her down. Carefully. Get me light. Get me water. Get me anything sharp that's been sterilized." The next 3 hours were the longest of Taeho's life. He cut away the melted armor piece by piece, exposing the burned flesh beneath. He cleaned wounds that should have been fatal. He applied salves and bandages made from whatever materials he could find. He worked with nothing but cargo supplies and sheer determination. Several times, Neela stopped breathing. Each time, Taeho brought her back. He refused to let her die. He had lost patience before. He had accepted that some battles couldn't be won, but he would not accept losing her. Not today. Not ever. When the surgery was finally complete, Taeho collapsed into a chair beside her. His hands were covered in her blood. His body shook with exhaustion. But Neela was alive. Her breathing had stabilized. Her vital signs were weak but steady. He had saved her. Hours later, she woke. Taeho was still sitting beside her, his eyes closed in restless sleep. He jerked awake when he felt her hand touch his. "You stayed," Neela whispered. Her voice was weak, barely audible. "Of course I stayed. I almost died. I know. I was there." Neela's golden eyes found his. They were different now. Softer. The fierce warrior had been stripped away, leaving something vulnerable beneath. "You saved me." It was not a question. "I did what I do. I save people." She squeezed his hand. It was the smallest gesture, barely any pressure at all, but it said everything. "Thank you." Taeho squeezed back. "Don't make me do it again. That surgery was terrible." Neela laughed. It was weak and painful, but it was real. She closed her eyes and fell back asleep, her hand still holding his. Raya found them like that an hour later. She stood in the doorway of the cargo bay turned hospital and watched the human medic sleeping beside her injured sister. She had come expecting to find Neela dead. Instead, she found her alive because of a man who had no business being in a war zone. She had underestimated him. They all had. When the battle finally ended, the Volanthi had won, but at a terrible cost. Thousands of warriors were dead. Dozens of ships were destroyed. The border had been held, but just barely. And in the aftermath, everyone spoke of the human medic who had turned a cargo bay into a hospital and saved the life of one of Kessa's daughters. Taeho didn't care about the praise. He only cared that Neela was alive. That was enough. That was everything. The war continued. Weeks passed. The Sketh pushed deeper into Volanthi territory, burning colonies and slaughtering civilians. Intelligence reported that their attacks had a pattern, but no one could figure out what it was. They seemed random, chaotic, without purpose. Then, Sarah found the truth. "They're targeting our genetic repositories," she said, standing before the War Council. Her face was grim. "Every colony they've attacked has one thing in common. They all contain samples of Volanthi genetic material. Backup bloodlines. Emergency breeding stock." The council erupted in anger. The genetic repositories were sacred. They contained the hope of the Volanthi species. Samples that could be used to restore bloodlines if they were lost in battle. "If they destroy the repositories," Elder Mova said quietly, "they don't need to kill us all. They just need to wait. Our genetic decay will do the rest." Raya slammed her fist on the table. "Then we stop them. Where is the next target?" "Colony 7. It contains the largest repository in the Empire. Over 10,000 samples, including samples from the bloodline of Kessa." The room fell silent. Kessa's bloodline. The bloodline of the three sisters. If those samples were destroyed, the last hope for continuing that legacy would rest entirely on Raya, Neela, and Sira themselves. "We go now," Raya commanded. Full assault. Every ship we can spare. The battle for Colony 7 was devastating. The Valanthi fleet arrived to find the colony already under attack. Sketh warships filled the sky like a plague of locusts. Ground forces swarmed through the streets, killing everyone they found. The genetic repository was located in a massive bunker beneath the colony's center. The Sketh were digging toward it. Raya led the counterattack personally. She took a strike team to the surface, fighting through waves of Sketh soldiers. Nyla, still recovering from her wounds, commanded the fleet from orbit. Sarah coordinated scout movements, searching for weak points in the enemy formation, and Tejo stayed on the command ship, watching helplessly as the battle unfolded. Then everything went wrong. Raya's strike team reached the bunker, but it was a trap. The Sketh had anticipated them. Thousands of soldiers surrounded the bunker entrance. Cutting off any escape, Raya ordered her team to retreat while she held the line. She killed 100 Sketh before they overwhelmed her. The last thing anyone saw was her being dragged into the tunnels, still fighting, still refusing to yield. No! Neela screamed from the command deck. We have to go after her. The tunnels are flooded with Sketh, a tactical officer reported. Any rescue attempt would be suicide. Then we commit suicide. I won't leave her down there. I won't leave her down there. If we lose the fleet, we lose everything, Syrah said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. Raya would not want that. Tejo watched the sisters argue. He saw the despair in their eyes. Their eldest sister, the leader of their family, was captured, and there was nothing they could do, except there was something he could do. The Sketh don't know what humans are, he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Your scanners, your alarms. They're all calibrated for Valanthi biology. But humans are different. Different body heat. Different chemical signatures. If I go down there alone, I might be able to slip past their detection systems. Nyla shook her head. You're talking about infiltrating an enemy stronghold with no weapons, no backup, and no way out. Yes, you'll die. Maybe. But if I don't try, Raya will die for certain. And I can't let that happen. Syrah grabbed his arm. Tejo, please. This is not your fight. This is not your war. You don't have to do this. Tejo looked at her, then at Neela, then at the tactical display showing the tunnels where Raya was being held. Yes, he said. I do. The drop pod landed in a destroyed section of the colony, far from the main Sketh forces. Tejo crawled through rubble and debris, moving slowly, carefully. He had memorized the tunnel layout. He knew where the prisoners were kept. All he had to do was get there without being seen. The tunnels were dark and wet. Sketh soldiers patrolled every corridor, their insectoid bodies clicking and chirping in their alien language. Tejo moved like a shadow. He pressed himself into crevices. He held his breath when patrols passed. He used every trick he had learned from surviving the labyrinth trial. Hours passed. He lost track of time. The darkness became his world. Finally, he found her. Raya was chained to a wall in a small chamber. Her armor had been stripped away. Her body was covered in burns and cuts. She had been tortured for information, but her face showed no sign of surrender. Even now, beaten and broken, she was still a warrior. Tejo? Her voice was weak, confused. How are you here? I walked. He began working on her chains, using a small cutting tool he had brought. Very quietly. You came alone? Into a Sketh stronghold? For me? You would have done the same for me. The chains fell away. Raya collapsed into his arms. She weighed more than him, but adrenaline gave him strength. He lifted her and began walking toward the exit. The genetic samples. Raya whispered. They're in the next chamber. The Sketh are preparing to destroy them. Tejo faced a choice. He could take Raya and run, or he could try to save the samples that represented the hope of her entire species. It wasn't really a choice at all. He found the repository chamber guarded by only 2 Sketh soldiers. The main force had moved to the surface to fight the Volanthi fleet. Teho set Raya down gently and approached the guards. He was not a warrior. He had never killed anyone. But he had learned things during his time with the Volanthi. He had learned that sometimes, protecting life meant taking it. The first guard died quickly, struck from behind before it could react. The second turned to face him, raising a weapon. Teho moved faster than he thought possible. He grabbed the weapon and turned it against its owner. The guard fell. His hands were shaking. His stomach turned with nausea. But he pushed those feelings aside and entered the repository. The samples were stored in protective containers, hundreds of them lining the walls. Teho grabbed as many as he could carry, loading them into a bag he had brought. He couldn't save them all, but he could save some. Then he returned to Raya, loaded her onto his shoulders, and began the long journey back to the surface. The extraction point was 3 kilometers away. Teho walked every step of it, carrying a woman twice his size. His legs burned, his back screamed, his lungs felt like they were filled with fire, but he kept walking. When they finally reached the extraction point, a shuttle was waiting. Sarah jumped out and helped him load Raya inside. Her eyes were filled with tears. "I thought you were dead," she said. "Not yet." The shuttle lifted off. Behind them, the Volanthi fleet was beginning to overwhelm the Sketh forces. The battle for Colony 7 was nearly won. Raya regained consciousness during the flight. She looked at Teho with an expression he had never seen before. Not gratitude. Not surprise. Something deeper. "You came for me," she said. "Of course." "Why?" Teho thought about the question. He thought about everything he had experienced since meeting the 3 sisters. The trials. The battles. The quiet moments of connection that had grown into something he didn't have a name for. "Because you would have come for me," he said. "And because I couldn't imagine a future without you in it." Raya reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were rough from centuries of battle, but her touch was gentle. "Human," she said softly. "You are the strangest creature I have ever known. And the most precious." She closed her eyes and slept. Teho held her hand the entire way home. When they returned to the fleet, the War Council was waiting. They had watched the rescue through remote sensors. They had seen a single human do what their entire military could not. Elder Mova met them at the landing bay. She looked at Teho for a long moment, then bowed her head. It was the first time she had ever bowed to anyone. "Thank you," she said, "for saving my granddaughter." Teho bowed back. "Thank you for letting me try." The intelligence gathered during Teho's rescue mission proved critical. Hidden within the Sketh stronghold, he had accidentally discovered their command frequency codes. Volanthi communications officers cracked their entire network within weeks. Suddenly, every Sketh movement was known in advance. Every attack was anticipated. Every ambush was turned into a trap. The Sketh dominion fractured. Internal rebellions erupted as different factions blamed each other for the defeats. By the time the Volanthi fleet reached their homeworld, there was barely an enemy left to fight. The ancient war that had lasted for thousands of years ended not with a great battle, but with a quiet surrender. The galaxy was at peace. On the Volanthi homeworld, the Throne of Ashes celebrated its greatest victory. Fireworks filled the sky for 7 days and 7 nights. Warriors danced in the streets. Songs were sung about the heroes who had saved the Empire, and in the great hall of the palace, a different kind of celebration was being prepared. Teho stood in a small room, staring at himself in a mirror. He wore ceremonial robes, white silk with gold embroidery. The clothes felt strange on his body. Too formal. Too heavy. He had grown used to simple work clothes and military uniforms. A knock came at the door. "Come in," he said. Baek Do-yoon entered. His old squad leader had arrived on the homeworld a week ago, traveling all the way from human space to witness the ceremony. His face, scarred from years of mercenary work, split into a wide grin. "Look at you," Baek said. "The man who fixed pipes on a space station, about to marry 3 alien warrior queens. Your mother would be so proud." "Oh," My mother would be horrified. Same thing. They laughed together. It felt good to laugh. Taeho had done very little laughing in the past year. There had been too much fighting, too much healing, too much death. Are you nervous? Beck asked, terrified. Good. That means you're taking it seriously. Beck clapped him on the shoulder. Listen. I've known you for 15 years. I've seen you walk into radiation. I've seen you operate on wounded soldiers while bombs fell around you. I've never seen you back down from anything that mattered. This is different. Yes, this is bigger. Which is why you'll be fine. Beck smiled. You've always been the best of us, Taeho. The quiet one who showed up when everyone else gave up. These women are lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. Then get out there and make it official. The great hall was filled with thousands of Valanthi warriors. They stood in perfect rows, their armor gleaming, their faces solemn. At the front of the hall, the High Council sat in their ceremonial seats. Elder Mova occupied the central throne, dressed in silver robes that caught the light of 100 torches. Taeho walked down the center aisle, feeling every eye upon him. His heart pounded in his chest. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them to remain still. At the altar, 3 figures waited. Raya stood tallest, her silver armor replaced with a gown of deep crimson. Her steel eyes were soft as they watched him approach. The scars from her torture had healed, but faint lines remained. She wore them like badges of honor. Neela stood beside her, dressed in gold. Her wild hair had been tamed into an elegant arrangement. She grinned when she saw Taeho, showing teeth that could tear through metal. She looked ready to laugh or cry or fight, perhaps all 3. Sarah was smallest, wrapped in flowing white. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and joy. She had always been the first to believe in him. Now she would be the first to welcome him into their family. Taeho stopped before them and bowed. Elder Mova rose from her throne and walked to the altar. The hall fell absolutely silent. We gather today, she announced, to witness something unprecedented. In 10,000 years of Valanthi history, no male has ever been bonded to multiple daughters of the same bloodline. Our traditions demanded that candidates choose one, only one. She paused and looked at the 3 sisters. But the daughters of Kessa have chosen differently. They have petitioned the High Council to change our ancient laws. They have argued that this human has proven himself worthy of all 3, and after much debate, the council has agreed. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Taeho heard shock in some voices, disapproval in others, but also, surprisingly, approval. Kang Taeho, Elder Mova continued. You have completed the trials of flame. You have saved countless Valanthi lives in battle. You have infiltrated an enemy stronghold alone to rescue my granddaughter. You have demonstrated courage, resilience, and compassion beyond anything we expected from your species. She turned to the 3 sisters. Raya, Neela, Sarah. Do you accept this human as your bonded partner? Will you share your lives, your blood, and your futures with him? I accept, Raya said. Her voice was strong and clear. I accept, Neela said. Her grin widened. I accept, Sarah said. Her eyes glistened with tears. Elder Mova turned back to Taeho. And do you, Kang Taeho, accept these women as your bonded partners? Will you stand beside them in peace and war? Will you give your strength when they are weak and accept their strength when you are weak? Taeho looked at the 3 sisters. He remembered their first meeting, when Raya had tested him with insults. He remembered Nyla's challenge and their brutal sparring match. He remembered Sira's quiet curiosity and gentle smile. He remembered the trials, the heat that should have killed him, the darkness that should have broken him, the grief that had broken him, but only so he could be rebuilt stronger. He remembered the war, the wounded soldiers he had saved, Nyla's blood on his hands, Raya's weight on his shoulders as he carried her through enemy tunnels. He remembered all of it, and he knew that there was only one answer he could give. I accept, Elder Mova nodded. She produced a ceremonial knife and made a small cut on her own palm. Blood, dark silver in the torchlight, pooled in her hand. By my blood and my authority, I declare this bond complete. From this day forward, Kang Tae-ho is no longer a human of Earth. He is consort of the Three Blades. He is family. He is Valanthe. The hall erupted in cheers. Warriors stamped their feet. Weapons clashed against shields. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, and absolutely joyful. The four of them, 3 warriors and 1 medic, stood together at the altar, hands joined. They did not speak. They did not need to. The ceremony ended. The celebration began. Food and drink flowed freely. Music filled the air. Warriors who had fought in 1,000 battles danced like children. Later that night, Tae-ho stepped onto a balcony overlooking the throne of ashes. The twin suns had set, and the sky was filled with unfamiliar stars. He stood alone, breathing the cool desert air, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Raya joined him first. She stood at his side, close enough to touch. "You look thoughtful," she said. "I'm wondering if I'm dreaming." "You are not dreaming. This is real. I am real. We are real." Neela arrived next, carrying 3 drinks. She handed one to Tae-ho and one to Raya. "To victory," she said, raising her glass. "And to the stubborn human who wouldn't stay down. To survival," Sarah added, appearing behind them. "And to the future we thought we'd lost." They drank together. The liquid was sweet and warm, filling Tae-ho's body with gentle heat. Below the balcony, in the palace courtyards, something caught Tae-ho's attention. Children. Valanthe children. Playing in the moonlight. They were small. Barely old enough to walk, but they moved with the grace and strength of their warrior mothers. "The first generation," Sarah said softly. "Born from human Valanthe unions. The genetic tests came back last month. They're healthy. Stronger than anyone expected. The decay has been reversed." Tae-ho watched the children play. They chased each other through the courtyard, laughing and shouting in a mix of Valanthe and human words. They represented something that had seemed impossible just a few years ago. Hope. Real. Living hope. "We did it," Neela said. There was wonder in her voice. "We actually did it." Raya put her arm around Tae-ho's shoulders. Sarah leaned against his other side. Neela stood before him, grinning. "Not we," Raya said. "Him. The human who walked into radiation. The human who survived the trials. The human who saved my sister. The human who saved me." She looked at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. But in those eyes, Tae-ho saw something new. Something that had never been there before. "Love. Our mother died protecting our people," Raya continued. "She was the greatest warrior the Valanthe have ever produced. But I think, if she could see us now, she would say that you have done something even greater. You have guaranteed our future. Not with weapons. Not with war. With kindness. With courage. With your strange, beautiful human heart." Tae-ho didn't know what to say. Words felt too small for this moment, so he didn't speak. He simply held the 3 women who had chosen him and looked up at the stars that now belonged to all of them. The future was no longer uncertain, it was guaranteed.